There is a curious paradox at the heart of our existence. The more earnestly we attempt to grasp reality, the more it slips through our fingers like grains of sand. We live, breathe, and act with the conviction that our thoughts, perceptions, and judgments reflect something solid, something true. Yet, beneath this seemingly stable surface, Schopenhauer whispers a different message, one that unsettles and awakens in equal measure. He tells us that our minds do not touch reality directly, that the world we think we know is less a mirror and more a veil, a stage lit by illusions, shadows, and projections. What we call truth is entangled with layers of deception, not always malicious, but woven into the very fabric of human cognition. To step into this philosophy is to step into a theater where every character and every prop may be masking something deeper, something far stranger than we ever dared imagine. To introduce Schopenhauer's secret philosophy on truth and deception is to open a door that refuses to close once unlocked. It is not merely a dry exercise in metaphysical speculation but an invitation to confront the architecture of your own consciousness. Imagine walking through a forest at twilight, where trees stretch into silhouettes, and the path beneath your feet feels uncertain. Every sound, a rustle of leaves, a distant cry of an animal, carries with it both familiarity and mystery. Schopenhauer positions us in such a forest of perception. He tells us that the mind constructs a landscape that feels coherent but is in fact riddled with distortions. We mistake the map for the territory, the shadow for the object, the echo for the source. This is not an error we can easily correct, for the very tools we use to perceive and to think are themselves steeped in illusion. Yet, there is a peculiar beauty in this disquieting revelation. To realize that your mind lives in illusion is not only to discover limits but also to discover a secret path toward liberation. The illusions are not merely prison bars, they are also patterns, like the shifting colors in a kaleidoscope. They can deceive, but they can also reveal, depending on how we hold them, depending on whether we grasp them with blind attachment or with curious awareness. Schopenhauer, in his stern yet strangely luminous way, insists that the truth is not destroyed by illusion but hidden beneath it, much as a pearl lies concealed within the shell of an oyster, demanding effort and courage to uncover. Consider the way we experience time. To us, time feels like an endless river, flowing from past through present to future. We measure it, divide it, structure our lives around it. Yet, Schopenhauer argues, time is not an ultimate reality but a framework the mind imposes. In truth, it may be nothing more than a necessary condition of how we perceive the world, not the world itself. In the same way, space, causality, and even the categories through which we judge good and evil are less like windows onto the real and more like lenses through which reality is refracted. These lenses grant us access but also obscure, offering both vision and distortion. In this sense, illusion is not a mere accident, it is the ground upon which our experience stands. This is why Schopenhauer's philosophy carries both weight and wonder. He does not dismiss illusion as trivial or simply false, rather, he portrays it as an essential veil that both hides and shapes the real. To live without recognizing this is to be ensnared in a dream, mistaking the dreamscape for reality itself. But to awaken, even partially, to the deceptive structures of mind is to begin a new kind of journey, one that peers beyond the veil without tearing it recklessly apart. It is a call to live with deeper awareness, to navigate the illusions without being consumed by them, and to seek the truth not in the brittle surface of appearances but in the silent depths beneath. To ground this in our ordinary lives, consider how often we are deceived not by enemies or strangers but by our own expectations and desires. We imagine a certain outcome will bring us happiness, only to discover a different emptiness when we arrive. We cling to judgments of others, confident that we see them clearly, only to realize later how much we had projected onto them from our own fears and needs. These are not isolated accidents, they are the rhythm of human life itself. Schopenhauer tells us that desire is the engine of illusion, constantly moving us forward yet never allowing us to rest in satisfaction. The will, his great metaphysical principle, drives us like an unseen current, and in its ceaseless motion, we confuse the restless waves for the calm depth of truth. At first glance, such a philosophy might appear bleak, even suffocating. If all is illusion, if truth is hidden, are we not condemned to wander endlessly in deception? Yet, the strange alchemy of Schopenhauer's thought is that, by acknowledging this, one discovers an unexpected clarity. To know that your mind dwells in illusion is to loosen the grip of certainty. It is to treat your perceptions with humility, to approach life as a mystery rather than a solved equation. In this humility, a doorway opens to compassion, for we realize that others too are caught in the web of deception. Their struggles, their errors, their vanities are not simply flaws but the inevitable shadows cast by the same veiled light that shapes our own. Thus, this introduction is not merely a prelude but an opening act in a drama that unfolds both within and beyond us. We stand before a philosophy that reveals the theater of the mind as both prison and possibility, deception and revelation. Schopenhauer does not hand us a clean map, but he offers us a lamp, a way of seeing the veils themselves and, perhaps, glimpsing through their translucent folds. The challenge is not to escape illusion entirely, an impossible task, but to navigate with awareness, to sense the difference between surface and depth, to live as though truth matters even when it is hidden from direct sight. In this journey, you are not simply reading a philosophy but entering into a mirror, one that reflects not only Schopenhauer's insights but also your own unexamined assumptions. Every belief, every desire, every certainty you carry may prove to be a mask, a stage prop in the vast theater of consciousness. And yet, there is wonder in this recognition. For to see the mask is already to take one step closer to the face behind it. To hear the echo as echo is already to be listening for the original sound. This is the threshold where we begin. The path ahead will lead us deeper into the structure of Schopenhauer's thought, into the core themes that shape his vision of illusion and truth, and into the symbolic narratives that carry his message beyond dry philosophy into living myth. But first, we must pause at this gateway, for the act of beginning is itself sacred. To admit that our mind lives in illusion is not to despair but to awaken, not to lose ground but to prepare ourselves for a different kind of journey, one that does not promise easy answers but offers a rare and transformative clarity. To step more fully into Schopenhauer's secret philosophy is to enter into a labyrinth whose walls are built not of stone but of perceptions, desires, and the restless movements of the will. Here, the traveler quickly learns that every turn of thought and every passage of feeling is shaped by something deeper than conscious choice. The mind, though proud of its rational structures, does not stand as master over reality. Instead, it is a mediator, a filter, and at times, a deceiver. The great core of Schopenhauer's thought rests on this realization: what we take to be the solid truth of the world is in fact a representation, an image conjured by the mind and constrained by its own architecture. Reality as it is in itself remains hidden, veiled, always beyond the grasp of our direct experience. At the heart of this philosophy lies the division between the world as representation and the world as will. The world as representation is the stage upon which we live our daily lives. It is the realm of colors, forms, objects, and events, the ordered fabric of time and space through which we move as if it were the only reality. Yet, according to Schopenhauer, this realm is already filtered, structured by the mind. Just as the eye transforms light into the image we see, the mind transforms the raw unknown into the coherent world of appearances. Time and space are not properties of things themselves but lenses through which we interpret them. Causality is not a chain we discover in the world but a framework we impose upon it. Thus, the world we know is more akin to a dream than a revelation. It is a necessary and consistent dream, but still a dream nonetheless. But beyond this stage lies something far stranger, something Schopenhauer called the will. If representation is the image, will is the energy, the blind striving that animates all things. Will is not willpower in the ordinary sense, it is not intention or conscious desire alone. It is the fundamental force that pulses through nature, the drive behind survival, reproduction, hunger, and ambition, as well as behind the motions of rivers, storms, and the growth of trees. It is restless, insatiable, without ultimate aim or final peace. And it is this will, Schopenhauer insists, that is the true essence of the world, the reality concealed beneath the veil of appearances. What we perceive as separate objects, distinct beings, and individual lives are but manifestations of this single, blind force. This duality, the world as representation and the world as will, forms the foundation of Schopenhauer's philosophy of truth and deception. Our minds live primarily in the realm of representation, navigating appearances as though they were final. But in so doing, we deceive ourselves, for we forget that behind these appearances lies a deeper reality that does not conform to our categories of understanding. We are like sailors who mistake the shifting reflections on the surface of the sea for the sea itself, forgetting the dark and restless waters beneath. Illusion, therefore, is not merely a trick of the senses. It is the very structure of our lived experience. To exist as a conscious being is to be caught in a web of representations, to see the world through the colored glass of perception and to mistake those shades for the pure light of truth. This is why Schopenhauer's philosophy strikes at the root of human confidence. He tells us that we are deceived not only by others but by the very faculties we most trust, our senses, our reason, even our moral instincts. Each of these serves a purpose, but each also obscures as much as it reveals. Consider desire, which for Schopenhauer is perhaps the most insidious architect of illusion. Desire convinces us that satisfaction lies just ahead, that once we attain a particular object, goal, or relationship, peace will arrive. Yet every satisfaction fades quickly, replaced by a new longing. The cycle continues endlessly, not because we choose it, but because the will itself knows no rest. The illusion lies in believing that fulfillment will finally silence the will, when in fact the will cannot be silenced. It is in its nature to keep striving, to keep pulling us toward mirages of completion that vanish the moment we approach them. Thus, much of human suffering is born not from scarcity but from this very structure of desire. Even morality, that most exalted domain of human thought, does not escape the reach of illusion. Schopenhauer suggests that what often passes for moral reasoning is in truth another manifestation of the will, cloaked in lofty language. We speak of duty, justice, or virtue, but beneath these abstractions lies the restless striving of life itself, endlessly seeking expression. The deception here is subtle. It is not that morality is meaningless, but that its apparent clarity often hides a deeper, more ambiguous foundation. We cling to principles as though they were eternal truths, but they may in fact be responses to the same blind will that animates all existence. Yet, within this seemingly bleak framework, there is also a seed of profound insight. If we can learn to see the illusions for what they are, representations, desires, and projections, then we gain a kind of freedom. Not freedom from the will, which is too fundamental to escape, but freedom from the most painful forms of deception. By recognizing that every desire is a wave on the restless sea, we cease expecting final peace from its crest. By realizing that the world of appearances is not the final truth, we loosen our attachment to its fleeting joys and sorrows. In this recognition, Schopenhauer suggests, lies the possibility of compassion. For if all beings are manifestations of the same restless will, then their struggles are not separate from ours but shared. Their suffering is our suffering, their striving our striving. To live with this awareness is to live with a deeper sense of solidarity and humility. Thus, the core themes of Schopenhauer's secret philosophy converge around three great pillars: the recognition of the world as representation, the unveiling of the world as will, and the acceptance of illusion as both inescapable and revelatory. To see these themes clearly is not to step outside illusion entirely, but to awaken within it, much as a dreamer becomes lucid in the midst of dreaming. We still inhabit the dream, but we know it as a dream, and in that knowledge, we discover a strange and liberating clarity. This is the essence of Schopenhauer's teaching, that truth is hidden not because it is absent, but because it dwells beneath the veils we mistake for finality. Deception is not merely something inflicted upon us from without, it is woven into the very conditions of our existence. Yet within this web of illusion, the possibility of wisdom remains. To live with open eyes is to know that what we see is not the whole, and to live with open heart is to recognize that the restless will driving us is the same will driving all life. Philosophy, when left in the realm of abstraction, can become a tower of glass, transparent, fragile, and distant from the pulse of human life. Schopenhauer's vision, however, though stark in its metaphysical clarity, carries within it the seed of narrative, the rhythm of stories that echo across cultures and ages. If the mind lives in illusion, then to truly understand this truth, we must walk not only through ideas but through symbols, through parables that whisper of realities too vast for logic alone. Let us now enter this symbolic territory, where allegory and metaphor give flesh to the bones of philosophy. Imagine a grand theater, the curtain rising upon a stage that seems endlessly vast. Every detail, painted landscapes, actors in costumes, flickering torches, is so meticulously crafted that the audience forgets it is theater at all. The people in the seats become immersed, believing the dramas before them to be real. Yet behind the curtain, in the machinery of pulleys and ropes, in the sweat of stagehands, lies the truth that what appears before the eyes is only illusion, a representation meant to captivate but never to reveal its artifice. For Schopenhauer, this theater is life itself. The world of appearances is the stage, dazzling in its detail, persuasive in its consistency, yet always concealing the raw, unadorned machinery of the will that drives it all. In another allegory, we might imagine a traveler lost in a desert. He sees an oasis shimmering in the distance, palm trees swaying, waters glittering in the sun. His thirst propels him forward, step by step, convinced that relief awaits. But when he arrives, the image dissolves into nothing but sand and heat. The mirage has vanished, leaving him both exhausted and deceived. Yet soon, another vision appears on the horizon, and again he is compelled to chase it. This endless cycle mirrors the restless striving of the will. Desire projects images before us, illusions of satisfaction, of completion, and we pursue them with desperate urgency. But like the traveler's mirage, they vanish upon arrival, leaving us always in motion, never at rest. The desert is not simply barren land, it is existence itself, and the mirages are the deceptive promises of the will. There is also the ancient story of Plato's cave, which Schopenhauer transforms through his own dark lens. The prisoners chained in the cave mistake the shadows on the wall for reality, their chains preventing them from seeing the fire and figures behind them. For Schopenhauer, we too are prisoners of representation, taking appearances for truth. But his vision goes further than Plato's. Even if one turns and sees the fire, even if one ascends out of the cave to see the sun, one does not find pure truth. For behind even these revelations lies the will, a force that is not light but blind striving. In Schopenhauer's cave, there is no ultimate escape, no final ascent into pure clarity. The illusion is not a temporary barrier to be left behind but the very fabric of our perception. Another symbolic thread can be drawn from mythologies of the veil. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of Maya describes the cosmic illusion that veils ultimate reality, seducing beings into mistaking the transient for the eternal. Schopenhauer, deeply influenced by Eastern thought, wove this imagery into his own philosophy. Imagine standing before a great temple, its entrance covered by a heavy, jewel veil. The veil dazzles with colors and patterns, so captivating that one forgets to wonder what lies behind it. Life is this veil, shimmering with forms, sensations, and desires. We press our faces against it, mesmerized, rarely daring to lift it. And even if we do, we may not find comforting divinity but the raw, unyielding force of the will, sacred in its power, yet indifferent to our longing for peace. Consider also the allegory of the mask. Each of us wears a mask in the theater of life, presenting faces to the world, to others, and even to ourselves. These masks are necessary, for they help us navigate society and relationships. But over time, we mistake the mask for our true face. We begin to believe in the persona we project, forgetting the restless, untamed will that animates us beneath the surface. Illusion here is not only in how we perceive the world but in how we perceive ourselves. We are characters in a play who have forgotten that we are actors, that the roles we play are fleeting performances upon a stage we did not build. Yet, amidst these somber symbols, there is one that carries a gentler light, the mirror. Schopenhauer's philosophy, though austere, invites us to treat illusions as mirrors rather than prisons. When we gaze into the shimmering images of desire, we can, if attentive, glimpse the deeper truth they conceal. The mirage in the desert, though false, reveals the ceaseless thirst of the will. The masks we wear, though deceptive, reflect the deeper unity of human striving. Even the shadows on the cave wall, though not reality itself, point us toward the recognition that there is more than what appears. The mirror does not give us the thing itself, but it reveals that something is there, something worth seeking. These narratives, whether desert mirages, cave shadows, jeweled veils, or masked faces, all converge on the same insight: our minds inhabit a realm of illusion that is both inescapable and instructive. The illusions deceive us, but they also teach us. They obscure truth, but they also point toward it. They bind us, but they also awaken us when recognized. Schopenhauer's philosophy, therefore, is not simply a lamentation of human deception but a symbolic invitation to live lucidly within it. The great task, then, is not to flee from the illusions but to recognize their nature, to see the patterns within them, and to let them become teachers rather than tyrants. Just as a dreamer who becomes lucid gains a measure of freedom within the dream, so too can we, by acknowledging the symbolic nature of our lives, find clarity within the endless theater of appearances. And so the stories linger, the theater where the curtain never fully lifts, the desert where mirages multiply, the cave where shadows stretch endlessly, the veil that dazzles with patterns, the mask that hides yet also reveals, the mirror that reflects but never embodies. These are not merely metaphors, they are doorways into a deeper understanding of our existence, one that moves beyond logic and touches the realm of lived, symbolic truth. Philosophy that lingers only in abstraction risks becoming a constellation admired from afar, beautiful, distant, and untouchable. Schopenhauer's insight into illusion and will, however, begs to be lived, to be tested against the currents of daily existence. His vision, while unsettling, can be woven into the fabric of life in ways that shift our experience of reality, soften our attachment to false promises, and awaken within us a deeper form of compassion and clarity. To see illusion is not merely to despair, it is to begin navigating the labyrinth with open eyes. Begin with the recognition of desire's deceptive rhythm. In ordinary life, we are constantly propelled by the belief that happiness lies just beyond the next horizon, the next purchase, the next achievement, the next relationship, the next recognition. Each horizon recedes, leaving us restless and unsatisfied. Schopenhauer's reminder that the will never rests can liberate us from the compulsion to chase endlessly. This does not mean renouncing all activity or ambition, but it does mean approaching desire with awareness. When a longing arises, we can see it for what it is, a wave in the restless sea of will, compelling but transient. To recognize this wave is to loosen its grip, to act with freedom rather than compulsion, to enjoy the pursuit without mistaking it for salvation. This shift can ripple into our work. In careers and projects, the illusion often takes the form of arrival, the sense that success will bring ultimate fulfillment. Yet Schopenhauer's lens reminds us that satisfaction will always be fleeting. Knowing this allows us to work with devotion but without self-deception. We learn to value the process, the craft, the act of becoming, rather than clutching at a future reward that will dissolve as soon as it is attained. Illusion remains, but our relationship with it changes. It becomes a dance rather than a trap. Relationships, too, are steeped in illusion. We project onto others the weight of our needs, expecting them to embody stability, joy, or meaning. Yet beneath these projections, others are themselves restless manifestations of the same will, bound by the same illusions. When we see this, judgment softens. Compassion arises not as moral command but as natural resonance. The suffering of the other is not alien but shared. Their illusions are reflections of our own. Love, in this light, becomes less about possession or fulfillment and more about companionship within the shared dream. To love someone under Schopenhauer's philosophy is to recognize that both are actors in the same theater, both thirsting in the same desert, both chasing mirages together. There is also a practical humility that emerges. When we realize that perception is shaped by illusion, we become less rigid in our certainties. Arguments, conflicts, even political divisions can be seen through this lens. Each side clings to representations, mistaking them for absolute truth. To acknowledge the veil is to recognize the limits of our vision. It does not paralyze us into relativism but tempers us with patience. We act, we speak, we choose, but always with the awareness that our grasp is partial, our clarity refracted through the colored glass of the mind. Even suffering itself can be reinterpreted. Schopenhauer is often called a pessimist because he insists that life is saturated with pain, that suffering is the unavoidable consequence of the restless will. Yet, when integrated into daily life, this perspective does not diminish us but deepens us. To know that suffering is universal is to know that we are not singled out by fate. Our pain, though intimate, is part of the shared fabric of existence. This realization can dissolve the loneliness of suffering, transforming it into a point of connection. From this soil grows compassion, not as sentimentality but as a recognition of kinship in the struggle of being alive. One might also find practical wisdom in the small acts of aesthetic experience. Schopenhauer held that art, especially music, offers a rare glimpse beyond the veil of representation. In moments of deep aesthetic absorption, when we are lost in a painting, a symphony, or a natural scene, the restless will loosens its grip. Time seems to pause, desire subsides, and for an instant, we are freed from the cycle of striving. Though temporary, these moments are not trivial. They remind us that liberation is possible, even if fleeting. To seek art, to immerse oneself in beauty, becomes a way of touching truth not directly but obliquely, like light reflected on water. Practical integration also calls us to cultivate mindfulness, though Schopenhauer himself did not use that word. Awareness, the act of seeing illusions as illusions, is itself a form of spiritual practice. When anger rises, we can pause and recognize the will's restless surge. When desire inflames, we can observe its shape without being enslaved by it. When despair whispers that life is meaningless, we can recall that these whispers are the echoes of the same will, endlessly shifting, never final. To observe without clinging is to gain a measure of freedom within the dream. There is a paradox here worth holding. Schopenhauer tells us that we cannot escape illusion, yet he also shows us that by recognizing it, we can live differently. Illusion does not vanish, but its power to deceive weakens. We still thirst, we still chase, we still suffer, but with awareness, we cease mistaking these experiences for the whole of reality. We become lucid dreamers in the theater of life. And this lucidity, fragile though it may be, transforms the quality of existence. Even the most mundane routines, eating, walking, conversing, can be touched by this insight. Each is part of the great theater, each colored by the will's ceaseless striving. Yet within them, if we are attentive, lies the possibility of quiet recognition. The meal does not end desire, but it can be savored. The walk does not deliver ultimate peace, but it can open us to the rhythm of the world. The conversation does not dissolve illusion, but it can reveal the shared humanity beneath it. In this way, philosophy filters into daily practice, not as doctrine but as subtle shift in perception. Ultimately, the real-world implication of Schopenhauer's philosophy is not to retreat into despair but to awaken into humility, compassion, and lucidity. We live within illusions, but we can live knowingly, gently, with less grasping and more presence. The world remains a veil, but it becomes a veil we honor rather than blindly worship. Our task is not to tear it away but to see through it, to walk with it, and to let its shimmering patterns guide us toward a deeper attunement with the truth it conceals. As we arrive at the final turning of this path, it is worth pausing to recall the journey we have taken. We began by standing at the threshold of Schopenhauer's unsettling vision, the recognition that our minds live not in unmediated truth but in illusion, that what we call reality is shaped and distorted by the very faculties that make it accessible. From there, we walked into the heart of his philosophy, discovering the duality of representation and will, the ceaseless striving that animates all beings, and the deceptive frameworks of desire, morality, and perception. We descended into allegories and symbolic narratives, exploring deserts of mirages, veils of dazzling illusion, masks and mirrors, caves and stages, all of which spoke to the veiled nature of existence. We then emerged into practical reflections, asking what it means to live this philosophy in our daily lives, how it can temper ambition, deepen compassion, soften judgment, and awaken moments of lucid awareness. Now, in conclusion, we must not merely gather these threads but weave them into a single fabric, one that can serve not only as intellectual insight but as transformative call. For philosophy that does not touch the heart, that does not demand something of the soul, remains inert, like a book left unopened on a shelf. Schopenhauer's message, though veiled in stern language, is ultimately an invitation to transformation. It does not promise easy answers or utopian visions, but it does point toward a way of inhabiting life with greater clarity, humility, and depth. The first call is to awaken. Most of us live as dreamers who do not know they dream, carried by desires, judgments, and assumptions as though they were absolute. To awaken in Schopenhauer's sense is to realize that life is theater, that appearances are veils, that desires are mirages. Awakening does not dissolve the dream, but it changes our relationship to it. The awakened one sees the illusions as illusions, the shadows as shadows, the masks as masks. In this recognition, life becomes lighter, less suffocating, for we no longer cling so tightly to what must inevitably shift and dissolve. The second call is to compassion. If the will is the essence behind all things, then every being we encounter is, in some sense, ourselves. Their striving is our striving, their suffering our suffering, their illusions our illusions. To see this is to soften the boundaries of the self, to recognize that separation is itself part of the illusion. Compassion ceases to be a moral obligation imposed from without and becomes instead the natural response of one awakened to the shared fabric of existence. When we encounter anger, fear, or desperation in others, we can see beneath it the restless will we too embody. This does not erase conflict, but it changes its texture. It infuses even disagreement with a strange kinship. The third call is to embrace humility. In a world where perception is filtered, where truth is hidden, certainty becomes fragile. The wise do not cling to their views as final but hold them gently, aware of their limits. This humility is not weakness but strength, for it allows us to adapt, to listen, to live without the crushing burden of absolute conviction. It opens space for dialogue, for curiosity, for a kind of intellectual hospitality in which the unknown is welcomed rather than feared. The fourth call is to seek moments of transcendence, however fleeting. Schopenhauer's path to this lies especially in art, in the aesthetic experience where the restless will briefly subside. But it may also be found in nature, in silence, in moments of deep presence. These glimpses are not escapes from illusion but windows through it, moments when the veil becomes translucent and we sense something of the vast, indifferent yet sacred will behind all appearances. To cultivate such moments is to water the roots of the soul, to nourish ourselves with beauty that does not promise fulfillment but offers respite. And finally, there is a call to live lucidly. To live lucidly is to walk the world as both dreamer and witness, participant and observer. It is to pursue desires while knowing their impermanence, to savor joys while accepting their transience, to endure suffering while recognizing its universality. Lucidity does not mean detachment from life but deeper engagement with it, an engagement free from the tyranny of illusions mistaken for truth. The lucid life is not easier, but it is more authentic, more spacious, more aligned with the hidden architecture of reality. So, where does this leave us? Not with certainty, not with final answers, but with an orientation, a way of standing within the mystery of existence. Schopenhauer's philosophy reminds us that we are both deceived and awakened, bound and free, lost in illusion yet capable of glimpsing truth through its folds. The call is not to despair but to transform despair into awareness, to transmute the heaviness of illusion into the lightness of lucidity. Perhaps the most profound transformation lies in learning to live with the veil itself, not as an enemy to be torn away but as a sacred garment that both hides and reveals. Illusion is not merely deception but the canvas upon which life paints its patterns. To see this is to bow before the mystery, to honor the hidden truth even as we cannot grasp it, to walk with reverence in a world that is at once a mirage and a revelation. Your mind lives in illusion. This is Schopenhauer's stark gift, his unsettling secret. But within this truth lies the seed of liberation. By knowing the dream as dream, you awaken. By knowing the mirage as mirage, you walk the desert with different eyes. By knowing the mask as mask, you glimpse the face behind it. The call, then, is simple yet inexhaustible: awaken, see, soften, live lucidly. In doing so, you step not out of illusion but into it more fully, with clarity, humility, and compassion, transforming the theater of deception into a journey of truth. This is where the path of Schopenhauer's secret philosophy leads, not to the banishment of illusion, but to its transformation into wisdom. The curtain never fully lifts, but the play becomes luminous when we recognize it as play. And in that recognition, life itself becomes not less real but more profound, shimmering with the strange and hidden truth that has always dwelled within.